bought the Birkin and Kales. We do it Chanel. They wanna be just like us and all they bitches can tell, nigga.
What's up guys, Training by Tyler. Today we're talking about the Israetel files. Solomon released a video essentially just dicking on Mike Israetel's PhD paper that he wrote for his PhD. Originally the topic of the video was going to be a little bit about the stretch cult versus the science-based crew, which is funny because they both call themselves science-based. So we might throw some of that in there too, but we're going to start with the controversy of the whole Mike Israetel situation and get that out of the way first. So the news, what happened? Mike Israetel got his PhD in sports physiology from East Tennessee State University. Have you heard of him? I have. So what's the big deal? The big deal is that his dissertation was kind of written like shit, right? And that's me being generous too. It was pretty bad. There was a lot of statistical errors, spelling errors. It looked like it was written maybe by like a 5th grader, low-key. Now, does that matter for the academic integrity of the school? Yes, very much so. I would be very, very upset and, reconsider maybe going to East Tennessee State University if I saw that they were letting people graduate and get a PhD with that, right? I think that reflects really, really poorly on the school. Do I think it reflects poorly on Mike? Yes, also, but I think there are some caveats that we got to think about when we're talking about this. It's possible, and I'm going to sound like a Mike shill here for a little bit, but bear with me. Maybe it's possible he had a family death around that time, and he just was trying to get that one paper done, one and done, and get it under the thing, right? That says more about the university than him. For him, it's one paper he wrote that was bad, okay? That doesn't necessarily mean that everything he says is shit. It just means if he's writing papers, you need to look at his papers a little more carefully. But what he does on YouTube, he doesn't write papers. He doesn't do his own science. He just takes other studies and, to be honest, not really that anymore. Mostly he just does entertainment and gives very general basic fitness advice, right? But he does that and makes it digestible for the average person through humor and comedy and all that stuff. What about that requires him to be a PhD doctor? Nothing, right? Nothing. At the end of the day, was it a terrible dissertation? Yeah, it was a bad dissertation, and his PhD probably doesn't hold a lot of weight because of it, but everyone else preaching shit on YouTube doesn't even have a PhD. And the advice he gives, like I said, it's pretty general, basic stuff. So does his PhD mean anything? Not really, but also the stuff he's saying, you don't really need a PhD to say, and it's good stuff that he's giving out most of the time. And the stuff he says that people have a problem with is typically everything that revolves around stretch-mediated hypertrophy. Here's the thing, especially on YouTube, especially when you're selling stuff, you got to be sensationalist. You have to take a counterculture approach, and you have to just say a bunch of shit that sounds crazy and sounds different than what you've heard if you want people to actually click on your shit and buy your shit. That's just a fact, right? So what is he doing? He's saying, oh, okay, if I come out here and I'm just like, hey, the stretch is important, but so is tension, and you should kind of just do a little bit of both, that's not gonna get him anywhere, right? No one's gonna give a fuck if he's just like, yeah, you should like work out, okay? He needs to spin it in some way. And so the way he's spinning it is, oh, focus on the stretch. Because guess what? No one does, okay? If you take an average person or a person that's not been in the gym and you have them do bicep curls, guess which part of the movement they're gonna skip out on. Therefore, I do think it makes sense to preach to general population that for hypertrophy, the stretch is important, not because the stretch is better and that's the only form of hypertrophy, but because that's the part that most people skip out on, right? Even experienced people, when the reps get hard, like that's where you're cheating yourself out, right? Is that stretch of the movement. So do I think that stretch-mediated hypertrophy is better than hypertrophy guided by muscular tension? No, I think they both have their place and they're both important, and it's just that simple, right? But if you come out and say that, people aren't as inclined to be like, oh, okay, well, duh, so basically go work out with good form. Yeah, basically. So you gotta kind of be a little sensationalist and be like, oh, the stretch is so important, the stretch is so important. And then that's where you get people like Milo who are really pushing the stretch-mediated hypertrophy stuff, right? And some of the stuff he talks about is that lengthened partials are more effective than just regular reps. I would exercise caution when thinking about something like that. And the reason for that is, at the end of the day, so what? It's kind of the same reason you would do the stretch stuff, right? It's the same argument. So say you're skipping out on the eccentric portion of the movement and the guy's like, oh, yeah, I don't do it because it's not effective. So what? If the top third of the movement is where you get the most gains, but the bottom 2/3 you don't get a ton, you should still do the bottom 2/3 because guess what? In your everyday life, you're gonna be moving your body that way. So you wanna be strong in all the ways you can move your body, because guess what? That's how you tear shit. Oh yeah, I can do fucking 800 pounds on bicep curls in the top portion, but then if I drop it a degree too low, my fucking arm tears off. Yeah, you don't want that, right? So the same thing goes when Milo is talking about the lengthened partials are better. Maybe they are. Maybe he's right off this, what I presume is one study, which you should also exercise caution about. If it's one study, that doesn't mean anything, right? You need like fucking 20 million studies to be like, okay, we can say that definitively. But you should exercise the same caution, the same logic thinking about that. Oh, lengthened partials are better for hypertrophy. Does that mean I should only do lengthened partials? Fuck no. You should do the entire movement anyways. Okay. So that's the stretch cult stuff, right? So what is the science-based stuff? We're talking about, most of that shit is taken from Chris Beardsley's Instagram. And so what are the concepts that Chris Beardsley is talking about and pushing on his Instagram? From what I can tell, it's that muscular tension is the prime driver of hypertrophy, and that he thinks stretch-mediated hypertrophy is pretty much useless. Let me put up this Instagram post that he posted recently here. Here's what it says. Sarcomeres are probably lost more quickly than myofibrils when the passive tension stimulus is removed. Limb immobilization in a stretch position increases muscle mass quickly in animal models by the addition of sarcomeres in series. Removing the stretch stimulus causes loss of all gains within a few weeks. Similarly, when facile lengths are increased by eccentric-only training in humans, all of the gains are lost within 2 weeks of detraining. Okay, what is this saying here? First up, we have sarcomeres and myofibrils. What the fuck are those? In this context, sarcomeres, he's talking about sarcomerogenesis, which is stretch-mediated hypertrophy. There's two types of hypertrophy. Myofibral hypertrophy, which is where the myofibrils of the muscle are what get bigger and multiply to cause the muscle overall to get bigger. And then there's stretch-mediated hypertrophy, or sarcomerogenesis, where the body adds new sarcomeres in series in order to increase the overall muscle length. Right, so basically in this, he's just saying that stretch-mediated hypertrophy, the gains from that are getting lost more quickly than myofibral hypertrophy. And his source for that is this study that they did in animals where they immobilized the limb in a stretched position and then had some passive tension on it. So basically like isometrics in a stretched position, right? But then they got rid of that and it went away. And then he's trying to compare it to humans at the bottom, saying that when humans do eccentric-only training, the gains get lost pretty quick. Okay, how does this relate to training in humans and realistic training in humans? That's the important part. Realistic training in humans. So just because some chickens got muscle mass from doing basically isometrics and then they lost it, how does that relate to a human actually working out? First of all, no one's going in there doing just fucking eccentrics. And then the second part of this thing that he's saying is that when humans get hypertrophy from eccentric-only training, it gets lost quickly. Even Dr. Mike isn't doing that, right? He's advocating that you focus on the stretch, but you're still doing the entire concentric part, right? So no one realistically is going into the gym just doing lengthened partials. And if they are, like we said before, that's not the smartest idea, because you're not going to go into the gym, do just isometrics or just lengthened partials, and then leave and never come back to the gym and be like, oh, why am I not big? If you're actually focused on getting bigger, you're going to be in there long term, right? You're going to be in the gym for years on end. And eventually, that's going to add up, and that's not going to be something that you can just lose from 2 weeks. If you care about being big, you're going to be working out for a really, really long time, and you're going to continue to work out. And if you stop working out, it's because you no longer care about being big. That's the reality of it. And you're going to be doing all the other stuff that he talks about being good for muscle growth and myofibral hypertrophy, like choosing high leverage lifts for the lats or whatever muscle you're trying to target, which, by the way, that's not some crazy thing you need to study for. That's just fucking common sense. If you're trying to hit the lats, choose an exercise that actually hits the lats and engages the lats, because the lats are the primary mover and have the best leverage in that position. Because why would your body employ your shoulders to do a lat pull down if the shoulders have shit leverage and the lats have a ton? All that's saying is something super obvious, which is that you pick an exercise that actually works the fucking muscle you're trying to work. So what are the takeaways from this? They're both right and they're both wrong. And they have to be if they're trying to get clicks and stuff. They have to be sensationalist. Chris Beardsley has to post that common sense information with a confusing graph behind it. Otherwise, people aren't going to think he's super smart and think he knows more than them and buy his course or buy his training or whatever he's selling. And Milo has to give people an easy way out. Oh, if you don't like working out, but you're trying to get big, well, guess what? You only have to do half the movement so that people will come and buy his stuff, right? That's the nature of it, right? And I'm sure that once they get those clients, they both essentially train them with the same methodology, which is boring, right? And doesn't sell. We've had people working out for quite a good time now, and we see what works and we see what doesn't work. And what seems to work the best is what's kind of boring, which is just going to the gym every day, eating right, and making it happen, making it work, getting heavier in the weights, adding more reps when you can't get heavier, when you want to switch it up a bit. That's it. That's all there is to it. You just keep doing that. And then there's a lot of variables within that you can play around with for your personal body, depending on what you respond well to, like volume, like frequency. Even though the knowledge is there, and I'm giving it out to you guys for free, it's not easy to do. Even if you know all this stuff, it is not easy to stay on track for 5-6 years and build a really impressive physique. That is not easy. There's still benefit to getting a coach, even if you know technically what you have to do. So if you're a person that's having trouble, even if you know what you're doing, even if you don't, go ahead, DM me, leave a comment, and we'll get you on track. We'll make sure you hit your goals, and we won't hit you with a bunch of bullshit. All right, that's it for the video. Thank you, guys.